Hey guys, welcome back. This is the MMA Breakdown doing predictions for UFC on Fox 16. Dillashaw versus Barao 2, taking place July 25th in Chicago, Illinois. Last event in July, five of them in July, and as I'm filming this, it's the morning of UFC 189, and we have the tough finale tomorrow, so you probably won't have time to check out those predictions, but check out my predictions for Mir versus Duffy, as well as Fight Night Bisping versus Lates. But this is the last event in July, five of them in the month. Haven't had any of them as of right now as I'm filming this. But this to me is definitely an event worth having. I'm not a fan of all the fights that all the events the UFC runs these days, and I say that every video, but I say that because when there is a good card worth having, I think that it's right that I mention that, and that the cards that are good get our respect as MMA fans. So I do like this card top to bottom. It is pretty stacked. A lot of guys I care about. Not a lot of rising prospects or newcomers, but established guys, and that's what I want. I like that. So really strong card, definitely better than your typical Fight Pass or Fox Sports 1 Fight Night cards. This is good stuff. Definitely better than Fight Night Bisping versus Lates, and also the tough finale. But yeah, Dillashaw versus Barao main event. Almost over a year in the making. Let's just get right into this. Follow me on Twitter at MMA Breakdown 0, link in the description. And I already said check out my other prediction videos. Alright, starting off with the Fight Pass preliminary card, 4 fights at welterweight. Zack Cummings versus Dominique Steele. Steele's a newcomer. Zack Cummings from Tough 17. I didn't really think much of him on the show. Lost to Dylan Andrews. I think lost a decision there. Got outstruck. Couldn't take him down, and got had his shot stuffed. Got out grappled on the ground. But then I thought he overperformed against Rick Story. Gunnar Nelson. Won that first round definitely, was able to close the distance, clinch with him, was winning the striking battle in close, but then Nelson found his range in the second round, took him down, and subbed him pretty easily. Looked okay against Jan Cabral, was able to get him down, and really strong and physical enough to completely shut down the submission offense of Cabral, and just kind of did that to win a decision. And he was supposed to fight Braga Neto here, which I think would have gone exactly the same way his fight against Jan Cabral went, but taking on newcomer Steele, who I don't know anything about. I forgot to mention also Cummings had the Darce choke finish over Ben Alloway, and showed some submission ability there. So I think he's just kind of an okay prospect, a bit mediocre, but has some skills. So I really don't know, because I don't know anything about Steele, but I think based on the experience, Cummings might. If Steele's not some real bright prospect, I think Cummings will get the win, but. Enough time on that fight. Next up, a women's bantamweight, Jessamyn Duke versus Elizabeth Phillips. Not looking forward to this card. Definitely for me, easily the worst fight on the card. Jessamyn Duke just looks like she can't win a fight really against anyone. Lost to Raquel Pennington in the Tough House. It was a back and forth stand up fight. She's a Muay Thai style striker, but not really a high volume striker at all. And got the win over Penny Morgan in the finale. Again, just kind of outpointed her on the feet. Has range striking, is able to land from the outside, but then lost a real kind of shitty decision to Betch Kohea, where she just couldn't land anything, look completely flat, and it's not even like Correia was really hurting her, but just outstruck her in a pretty uneventful fight, and then got taken out big time by Leslie Smith in her last fight. Leslie Smith was just able to close that distance and unloaded on her against the fence, went to the body. I think that's what put her down, and completely ran over her. So Duke to me looks like she can't just win a fight. But on the other hand, Elizabeth Phillips, I think, is one of the most unskilled women fighters in the bantamweight division in the UFC. And her debut against Valerie Latorno, I thought she looked okay, was able to make a fight out of that. But very rudimentary striking, just kind of closing the distance and throwing sloppy overhands and things like that. And then her last fight against Milana Dudieva, everyone thought she got robbed. I actually thought Dudieva won the fight. Phillips found herself on top position, but not because she took her down. They kind of just, both of them just kind of fell over, and Dudieva, I think, had bad balance and slept a couple times there, and Phillips ended up on top. But even from there, from the bottom, Dudieva was, I thought, more active, and on the feet, Dudieva was really hustling and outstriking her for any amount of time that it was on the feet. So it's just really hard for me to see Duke winning a fight, but I have to go with Duke here because I just think she's the more skilled striker. Definitely, Phillips hasn't really shown an effective takedown or closing the distance kind of striking game. So I have to go with Duke, but would not surprise me one bit if Phillips won this year. All right, next up at lightweight, Ramsey Nijm versus Andrew Holbrook, another newcomer in Holbrook. Ramsey Nijm has just been up and down his entire UFC career to me ever since TUF 13, getting knocked out by Ferguson in the finale, and then just beating some guys, losing to some guys. Got knocked out his last fight against Carlos Diego Ferreira. They were trading back and forth, and Ferreira eventually just came out on top against Beneil Dariush. That's his one kind of good fight where he just stormed him and knocked him out in the first round. Won a decision against Justin Edwards that I thought was very close, and Edwards was winning that first round. Got submitted by Vic in the first round, and Miles Jury knocked him out. So, and has a decision win over Proctor. All over the place, really. Kind of a very wild and loose striking and grappling game. Loose in his fundamentals, but kind of wild, just really opportunistic, always going for things. So that's how I feel about Nijm. I don't think he's ever really going to climb the ranks. But Holbrook, a newcomer, I'm not going to make a pick. All right, next up, last fight on the Fight Pass preliminary card at lightweight, Darren Cruickshank versus James Krause. I'm taking Cruickshank here, and I hope he can get back to his really exciting style. Lost to Beneil Dariush, and there's not really any shame in that. Kind of weird that he was getting outstruck, though, by Dariush. Dariush just had one weapon, the body kick, and that seemed to be enough to frustrate Cruickshank on the feet, which was kind of weird, because Cruickshank had always been, such a dynamic, violent striker. The win against Coke I really liked. Had always beaten up on, Cans, really, other guys from TUF, Mike Rio, stuff like that. But against Coke, that was his first legit win over a serious guy. But then, lost to Masvidal, dropped him in that fight, but couldn't deal with the wrestling. And Cruickshank, even though he has some takedowns, he out-wrestled Inja Kawani, I just think doesn't have the complete enough game, and that's why he lost to Masvidal, and that's why he lost to his last fight to Dariush. James Krause, though, I was really high on this guy after his debut win over Sam Stout, where he looked great, ended up submitting him with a guillotine. But after that, just hasn't been able to sustain any kind of success or momentum. Had the bad the nut shot controversy over Green with Bobby Green, and then I even liked his win over Varner. Where he was leg kicking his ankle, seemed to be the more crafty striker. Looked good there, but then also lost to Masvidal, where he just was getting battered the entire fight and dropped a couple times late. And then against Volmir Lazaro, I thought he should have really... I expected him to win that fight, and didn't look bad, but just looked like he couldn't do enough to get the win, and Lazaro just landed a bit more, and lost the decision there, and that was kind of it for me. With James Krause, I've written him off since that loss. So I think Cruickshank can get back to his ways. He'll be the more high-volume, pressured striker, and I don't think Krause his kind of more low-volume technical game. I don't think that'll be enough against Cruickshank. I think Cruickshank's really going to push him and catch him with something big. So I got to go with Cruickshank. I think he can get a finish. All right, next up on the preliminary card on Fox, both the prelim and main cards are on Fox. I like it when they do that. But at bantamweight, Eddie Wineland versus Brian Caraway. This is a real fun fight and very interesting because Eddie Wineland has been out for over a year and went out on a really bad loss, a really surprising loss to Johnny Eduardo. Eduardo was just able to find his range, kind of, Wineland was trading with him, and then Eduardo just connected with a shot that seemed to wobble him and just put him out from there. And Brian Caraway, a really talented guy, some might say he's a dirty fighter, fish hooking and stuff like that. A real pest, just always going for looking to tie up and drag you down, and once it's there, very persistent, working for the rear naked choke. But the fights against Rafael Assunção and even Takeya Mizugaki, his only losses in the UFC, I think really showed he's just not a good enough striker to hang with the top guys. He did drop Mizugaki and almost finished him with a guillotine, but against Assunção, he was just outpointed. Couldn't get anything done, couldn't work his ground game, and was just flat the entire fight because Assunção was able to keep him at bay. So Eddie Wineland, I think if Caraway wins this fight, definitely going to be how he's always done it, on the ground with getting the takedown and working his submission game from there. And Wineland, other than his loss to Faber, has never really been a guy who's, been susceptible to that kind of game. So I feel like I got to go with Wineland here. I mean, the time off and going out the way he did, I think he even talked about retirement after his last loss. I definitely think that could play a role. But I think Wineland is close to being one of those elite guys. I mean, in the UFC only lost to Faber, Benavidez, Barao, and then of course Eduardo in his last fight. And I thought was struggling a bit against Jabwin early, but ended up getting the finish there on the ground. But when he was able to knock out Jorgensen and Pickett, that's where he was really at his best, and did it in different ways. Against Jorgensen, was able to land the big power shots. Against Pickett, he looked like a really technical range striker and kept Pickett on the outside the entire fight. And, if Caraway couldn't do anything against Assunção on the feet, I think Wineland's going to have a huge advantage there, both with the power and the range striking. So I got to go with the Wineland. I mean, I think there's a chance Caraway being more active and being persistent with the ground game could drag him down, but I got to go with Wineland because if Caraway can't get it to the ground, I think he's going to get wrecked on the feet. So I'll go with the Wineland. I think he can finish Caraway. All right, next up at welterweight, Kenny Robertson versus Ben Saunders, a real fun fight. Kenny Robertson, I love to see guys who really work hard and hustle, and that's exactly how Robertson fights. It doesn't seem like he has much natural ability, but just seems like he's getting better and better, adding skills. And those fights against Thiago Perpetuo and Ildemar Alcantara, I thought he'd lose both of those fights, and he just hustled and was able to get the win. always going for takedowns on the ground, always throwing ground and pound, always moving. Really fights with a sense of urgency and fights at a high pace. And then against Sultan Aliyev in his last fight, taking on this huge ripped guy that everyone had hyped up, and he just knocks him out, countering him with one shot, and impressive and kind of a feel-good fighter, I think, is Kenny Robertson. But Ben Saunders, very dangerous once it gets to the ground. I had picked Riggs to beat him, and Riggs took him down, but he went out with the neck injury. But immediately once he was taken down, he already locked up an omoplata. Had the omoplata finish against Chris Heatherly. But I don't know against Kenny Robertson. I just think I don't know how Saunders' striking game, his wrestling game will really stack up. I don't think he has the better wrestling than Robertson, but I don't. If Robertson takes it to the ground, I could definitely see Saunders catching him, but I think Robertson's smarter than that. He might try to keep it on the feet. I got to go with Robertson here. I think he's just been fighting better competition so far in the UFC. His finished fights, looks like he's getting better. And Saunders, while really dangerous, I think might be a bit of a one-trick pony. So I'm going with Robertson. All right, next up at lightweight, Jim Miller versus Danny Castillo. A very important fight. Both of these guys, especially Miller, this was an elite guy at lightweight, and he's taken some bad losses, hasn't really been able to regroup. And Castillo also, a guy who was going places and has since just kind of become a gatekeeper. I think this is a pivotal fight, for both guys going forward. Even just, being able to get big matchups if they want to just hang around for a couple more fights in the UFC. But real interesting matchup because, Jim Miller definitely got further in the sport. Beat guys like Oliveira, Charles Oliveira. Other than that, hasn't really had a signature win, but was always in there with top guys. Beat Gillard, but lost to Nate Diaz, lost to Ben Henderson, and just recently lost to Dariush in his last fight, getting out grappled badly, and then getting knocked out by Cerrone before that. But even before that Cerrone loss, showed that he can still compete with some of these rising prospects against Yancy Medeiros. Showed good technical awareness, able to land the body shot that put him down, and then jumped on the guillotine. But Miller, a real opportunist when it comes to submissions. I mean, this guy's wild. He against Ben Henderson, he's gone for flying arm triangle chokes, standing, and he'll drop back for knee bars and ankle locks like he did against Oliveira, and that's kind of how he's gotten by. His fundamental game isn't too strong. I mean, he's shown okay striking at times against Kamal Shalarus, Albox Gleason Tebow, but Danny Castillo has a real defined skill set, very persistent wrestler. Has great ground and pound once it gets there, but he's really been slowing down the last couple of years. I think getting better technically. The fight against Tony Ferguson, actually, I thought his striking looked more technical and fluid than it ever has, but he just looks older and slower, and I think that's why he's lost to guys like Felder, and that was his last loss, right? Yeah, lost to Felder. And the fight against Ferguson, I think he had to resort to, laying and praying him because he just didn't have the stamina to, do much else. But it's hard for me to see Miller, and I think Miller has more left in the tank. It's hard for me to see Miller out-wrestling him. It's hard for me to see Miller out-striking him. I think Miller will have a bit of a speed advantage on the feet. Miller, even against Cerrone early, was doing okay. But I think Castillo technically has the better striking, and if it becomes a wrestling match, I just think Castillo's stronger and bigger there. He's going to be able to get him down, and Castillo showed knockout power against Brenneman, and even against Michael Johnson years ago, dropped him and almost submitted him and won that fight. I'm going to go with Miller. I just think he has more left in the tank. You have to go with the guy that used to be something. I think a little more aggressive with his striking. I could see him, jumping on a submission. But if it just becomes a straight up kickboxing or wrestling match, I like Castillo to win that. But I'm gonna go with Miller. But really close, and I'm not too confident in my pick in Miller. All right, next up, light heavyweight fight, last fight on the prelim card: Villante versus Tom Lawler. Another pretty intriguing matchup. If this was, 3-4 years ago, I definitely picked Tom Lawler. I think John Villante is not a skilled fighter. He just really isn't. Always looks like he's on the verge of getting finished. Even his last fight against Corey Anderson, even though he was landing those leg kicks throughout the whole fight that were taking a toll on him, was still getting hammered on the feet, really took a lot of damage, got beaten up. I thought he was, he looked like he had a chance of being put away, and was just able to land that huge overhand out of nowhere that knocked out Anderson. But same thing, the last couple of years, the fight against Cody Donovan, was just getting lit up. Was getting lit up and pieced up by him. Really looked like he was going down, and then pulled out the knockout shot out of nowhere. I thought he lost the fight to Sean O'Connell. Really, ate a lot of shots and got pushed back. Was backing up the whole fight and looked like he gassed. Even against Maldonado, showed a good wrestling game early, but Maldonado came back and outstruck him on the feet. So Volante is not a skilled fighter, has bad cardio, but does have power that saves the day for him. And against Lawler, who's been extremely inactive, last fight was April of 2013, so over 2 years ago. Him being active during that time and picking up wins with power, I think that could be enough to catch Lawler. But just skill wise, Lawler, I think, is going to be much more skilled on the ground. He can get that guillotine. I liked his last win against Michael Kiper. Was kind of getting, I think, his leg kicked out. He didn't look too great, but jumped on that guillotine and was able to win the fight. Finished there in the second round. Lost to Carmont in a fight I thought he won. Everyone else did too. And before that, his wins are pretty irrelevant. Patrick Cote, Jason McDonald, and lost to some guys. I'm going to go with Lawler here. I like his chances to get that guillotine. On the feet, I do not like his chances. I mean, knocked out Jason McDonald, and other than that, hasn't really shown a good stand-up game. Villante, I think, will have the better kickboxing, can work those leg kicks, just be the better striker. But I think Lawler's going to find a way to get it to the ground or jump on a submission. And Villante just always looks like I said, like he's going to get put away. So I'm going to go with Lawler here. But again, the layoff, really long layoff, and, not looking great even when he was fighting. I could see Villante winning, but I'll go with Lawler by submission. All right, on to the Fox main card at lightweight: Joe Lauzon versus Takanori Gomi. I hope this is really a fun fight, but I am taking Lauzon. I mean, I think it's kind of going to look like the Nate Diaz fight for Gomi, where he was just outboxed on the feet and then finished on the ground. I think Lauzon can do something similar here. I mean, he definitely has to get it to the ground. Gomi is a more technical striker than Joe Lauzon, but he's been a good enough, active enough striker to get by against guys who aren't really good. The wins over Mac Danzig, lost to Diego Sanchez, but I thought he won that fight. Isaac Valley flag. But when he fights the better guys, he just goes down bad. Put away by Clay Guida, destroyed by Nate Diaz. Miles Jury in his last fight just knocked him out quickly, easily. And I think once it gets to the ground, Lauzon can submit him. On the feet, though, I think Lauzon needs to be careful. I mean, there have been times where his stand-up just looks horrible, and, his chin is kind of suspect. I actually thought his boxing looked improved in his last couple of fights, both against Iaquinta and Chiesa. Looked more active, showed more of a jab, but, against Iaquinta, couldn't eat the power shots. And then even a couple of years ago against Mac Danzig, I thought his boxing just looked really bad, was, just covering up and getting hit to the body a lot. And then, of course, the fight against Michael Johnson was outboxed badly. But Lauzon, I think, will be able to push the pace enough, make it a war, which Gomi's fights have typically been. And then once he gets it to the ground, I think that's it for Gomi. He'll submit him. So Lauzon by submission. All right, next up, a lightweight, Edson Barboza versus Paul Felder. Paul Felder, great performance last time against Danny Castillo. Was throwing spinning back kicks and knocked him out with the spinning back kick. His Muay Thai looked really sharpened up and looked tight. And I thought he even looked okay in his debut against Jason Sago. Showed some wrestling, some ground control in that fight. But I don't think that's enough to get by Edson Barboza. I really don't. Barboza, his last fight against Michael Johnson was pressured. He was walked back the entire fight and couldn't get anything off. But you see in the guy's fights against Bobby Green, against Evan Dunham, he's a technical, really dangerous striker. And I just don't see Felder having the striking to deal with that right now. They're against Green, it looked like he was coasting a bit, but was in complete control that entire fight. Lost the fight to Cerrone, but before he got finished, it was all over Cerrone, lighting him up. And he's just a more technical, dangerous striker. I could see Felder catching him, but I really think Barboza is going to have a huge technical advantage. So going with Barboza, I think Felder with some more development can win this fight. Barboza, I think, is good enough to beat a lot of the mid-level kind of lower end of the kind of top 20 guys in the division, but I don't see him being an elite guy, but I do think he gets past Felder here. So I got to go with Barboza. All right, co-main event, women's bantamweight, Miesha Tate versus Jessica Eye. Miesha Tate, I think other than when she fights Rousey, she just doesn't look too motivated. Doesn't look like, she gets in there and proves that she's a top contender and doesn't really separate herself from the rest of the women's division. But, she finds a way out. She finds a way to win the fight, even when it's not going her way, especially in that last fight against McMahon, which I thought she lost. And just got dropped by a woman who's never been considered a real talented striker. Just got dropped in that fight, but then fought her way back, was able to get on top, and really showed a huge technical advantage in the grappling. Even though I thought she lost that second round there, but won that fight. And then, her fight against Rin Nakai, again, she kind of did enough to win, but didn't look dominant, didn't look great. It's really only when she fights Rousey that I think she looks like she's motivated and deserving of her spot. And the Liz Carmouche fight, oh boy, that was just a stink fest. Against Jessica Eye, though, I think the ground game will be enough. Eye looks like a stand-up only kind of fighter, and I thought she looked good against Sarah Kaufman. It was a back and forth stand-up fight, but I actually thought she lost that fight, and then was looking good against Alexis Davis, definitely more impressive on the feet. But once it hit the ground, Davis was able to control her on the ground, land some ground and pound. And if she could do that, I think Miesha Tate will definitely have an advantage with the grappling and the wrestling, getting her down and scoring points there. And then her last fight against Leslie Smith, punched her ear and punched her ear in half, and that was it. But did look like she was winning that fight, outstriking her. I just think Tate, has the experience advantage, has fought better competition, and does have that grappling edge. But, if Tate's not motivated, comes in, a little too lackadaisical, it could definitely see boxing her up on the feet. But I have to go with Tate to get it to the ground and win a decision at the very least. So, if not submitting her. So I'm going to go with Tate. I hope it's exciting, though, because I could see that being a boring fight. But on to the main event at bantamweight. For the bantamweight title, TJ Dillashaw versus Renan Barao. I got to go with Dillashaw. Now, after the first of all, Dillashaw, I know I'm going to, sound like I'm full of myself here, but from Dillashaw's very first fight to get into the house on TUF 14, got a finish in that fight, looked good. From that fight, I actually thought he was going to be the one to win the show. Lost to John Dodson, but made it to the finale. From that first fight, I thought Dillashaw, was a special guy, and I've always been high on this guy. Always really enjoyed all of his fights. After the show, after losing to Dodson, dropping, still competing at bantamweight, but then he. I'm sorry, Dodson was the one to drop to flyweight, but after losing to Dodson, looked really good. Showed had a real dominant win in his fight right after that against Weil Watson, and his submission and striking ability really grew after that. Submitted Von Lee, knocked out Issei Tamura, finished Hugo Viana. Lost the fight to Rafael Assunção, his only loss other than John Dodson. But it was in a really close fight and competed really well. And then you look at his fights against Assunção and Mike Easton, and then the fight against Barao. I thought he was going to get destroyed. Took a huge step up in competition, but just completely transformed himself. Went to a good fighter. Went from a good kind of fighter, a good prospect, to outclassing the world champion. Super impressive, just improved dramatically, completely had Barao figured out, broke his game down to a science, completely transformed his striking style. Everyone compared him to Dominique Cruz, and just looked super technical, super accurate with his strikes, beat the crap out of Barao and put him away in the 5th round. Very impressive. And then, fought Joe Soto on, Joe Soto stepped in on 1 day's notice. Did everyone, kind of say Dillashaw didn't look so great, and I agree, he probably should have, it would have been nice to see him finish that fight earlier, but, it was a complete, change in opponent in just a couple hours, or less than 24 hours before the fight, so, and still ended up getting the head kick knockout in the 5th round. So I'm real high on Dillashaw. Has only fought that Joe Soto fight since the Barao fight. Barao's gotten a fight in against Mitch Gagnon. After that Dillashaw fight, Barao just came out with all his excuses and, said apparently he was sick. And, I don't discredit Dillashaw when they were supposed to rematch the first time. I picked Dillashaw, but I did think, I thought it was possible that, Barao could have been sick, could have been an off night, and, he can come back his regular self and compete really well against Dillashaw and, have a chance to get the win. But after seeing Barao fight Mitch Gagnon, I could not take him at all to win Dillashaw. I thought he looked a lot more gun-shy than he ever has. Never was, finished the fight on the ground. Never got that never got that kill shot like he had against Eddie Wineland or against Faber. Was just kind of going back and forth with Gagnon. Was the more technical guy, but looked like he won on talent there and not on dominance or hunger. And, Mitch Gagnon, not a bad fighter, but I think a far less technical and talented guy than guys like Wineland and McDonald, who he had fought before. And, the McDonald fight was tough, but, a less talented guy than someone like Faber, who Barao had beaten much more easily. And I think it was kind of that Junior Dos Santos kind of effect where, a guy just, he loses the belt, gets beat, and his next fight just looks a lot more hesitant, gun-shy, and just doesn't look himself. And I just thought he looked several steps slower, didn't throw with the same kind of authority that he did before. And, Dillashaw already having figured him out once, completely dominating and beating him up, I have to go with Dillashaw to do the same thing, And, who knows how much he's improved since that Soto fight. I mean, maybe he's gotten even better and had more time to study Barao. And, he's got a great cam. Dillashaw seems to be a real high IQ fighter, a lot of technical skill. The way that Barao fought against Gagnon, I don't think that's nearly enough to beat Dillashaw. So I'm going to go with Dillashaw here. I think he can get another finish. And I'm excited to see Dillashaw be more active. I hope Dillashaw wins this fight. I'd much prefer to see him be the champion than Barao, and I hope he can start fighting some other guys. But alright guys, those are my predictions for UFC on Fox 16, Dillashaw versus Barao 2. Thanks a lot for watching. Please like the video, comment, and subscribe. And I'm going to get ready to watch UFC 189. Thank you guys. Bye.